Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Blame It on Marketing. Today's episode is all about video and how we all need so much more of it because it's the thing we should be doing in B2B marketing. With us today we've got the lovely Chris Walker. Not that Chris Walker, but the original Chris Walker as far as we're concerned. But I'll let Chris introduce himself.
Thanks for that. Yeah, not the famous SaaS marketer Chris Walker, the original one. So I'm Chris. I run an animation studio called JoeMule Creative. We produce all kinds of animated video content, mainly for SaaS brands, but for some other kind of service-based businesses as well. And you are correct, everyone should be making lots more video.
So Chris, to kick us off, Ruta and I have been on the receiving end of this as well, as we've been when we've been in-house marketers in particular, where you are working with, it could be the fact that the senior leadership team have thought about this, or it could be the fact that, like maybe your CMO is like, we need to do some more video. So where does that come from? I don't want to call it a trend because it's not a trend, because it's it's a legitimate form of content. But where does that all kind of stem from?
So I think it comes from a few places, and I think when it comes from that kind of level, if it's CMO or something like that, there's usually a bit of thought behind it. They've identified maybe a gap that they're looking to fill with some video content or see an opportunity. The big thing for me is those companies who maybe decide to kind of jump on the bandwagon a little bit because the competitors are doing it, or they've been told, which tends to be SMEs more than anything, who maybe got one marketer or something like that, or maybe they don't have a marketer at all. Everybody's kind of pitching in ideas. So I think there's a bit of that kind of jumping on the bandwagon. Let's do it because our competitors are doing it, or somebody's told us we need a video and things like that. And those are usually the worst case scenarios for all those kinds of things, because there's no kind of desired outcome for those videos. It's just let's get some videos created. So those tend to be worst case scenarios with worst outcome propositions, really, if you understand what I mean. And I'm sure you've both had that, where maybe it's come from above that this is something we need to do, and you've got to try and dig into why exactly are we doing this.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, right? Because it's the purpose of it. I think we've heard it, Ruta. We know we both have at certain points, but yeah, it's always a bit like, but why and for what, and what do you want to do? And I think this obviously comes into when you hire someone such as yourself, Chris, is that people are like, we'll just make the most out of having Chris and his team in to make video, but we don't actually know what we want to use your time for.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that's probably the other side of it, why it's become it's even more popular in this kind of, let's make some more video content, let's make as much as we can, is I suppose the ease of creating video now. Both, there's a lot of agencies and kind of freelancers that you can kind of quite easily tap into. Some terrible places like Fiverr where you can really cheaply tap into those kind of things. But also, it's not that difficult to kind of make stuff in-house anymore. You see more kind of marketing teams taking that stuff on internally, sometimes with great results, sometimes with not so great results. But I think that, that'd be the other side of it, is just how easy it is to engage with creators, or just create it yourself, I suppose. And again, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's a great idea to be creating it just because you can, or that it's easier to create. But I think that's why you're seeing a lot of companies creating video that probably shouldn't have bothered, I'd say.
So what are some of the videos that you see, I guess the video types that you see in B2B that probably won't give you the results that you want to get?
Okay, I did write a post which I tagged you both on this morning, which was part of just doing a bit of digging into some of the stuff we've been doing over the last 12 months. And a lot of it does come down to, so from the animated stuff that we do, one of the big traps that people fall into is using one kind of video content across loads of different channels to try and get the same kind of result. So a classic one is, having a demo video sat on your homepage that you're driving cold traffic to, 10, 15 minutes of maybe a member of staff talking over the top of a screen record terrible idea. I have seen people using those as paid ads, which is an even worse idea, and just seems like a terrible waste of money. So that'd be one way of looking at it, and that's the kind of, I think sometimes people get stuck in that internal, or people like our product, they must like our product, so let's just dive straight into the product and show them absolutely everything it can do. And people don't want to see that kind of stuff when maybe they clicked on an ad or you've directed them by social or something like that. So that's a really, really common one. Certainly with the SaaS stuff that we do, is using demos as paid ads and kind of explaining videos and stuff like that. And then I think that the other one that's particularly terrible is that quite self-indulgent kind of either thought leadership stuff or kind of marketing videos that are just, I saw one the other day for a mortgage advisor that I mentioned when we spoke, that might be the worst ad I've ever seen on LinkedIn, just in terms of the content. It was really directed at what the guy does and his kind of reputation, and the first 15 seconds was really dedicated to the company and, you know, all the great stuff that they're doing and talking about themselves, and you just think it clearly wasn't planned out particularly well by either an experienced marketer or an agency, and I just feels like a huge waste of money for them. I can't see them driving any kind of revenue long term for that kind of stuff. So those are two big ones that I've seen a lot more over the last 12 months than I'd like to have.
I think that second group definitely comes from the like Grant Cardones and Tony Robbins's of the world, you know, 10x your life with this, and I'm the coolest man on earth, and that's why you should pay £3,000 for my course. Woo! Which I didn't think would go down well on LinkedIn. It probably isn't. It's just we're seeing a lot more of those. But you're right. In terms of planning a video, I think a lot of the time companies plan videos that they want to see about themselves. They don't necessarily plan videos that their audience would find engaging to see about them, which I feel like is a completely different ballpark.
Ruta and I have this sort of mantra, which we've had since we worked together back in the day, which is, you know, nobody gives a shit about what your company does and what you have to say about yourself. You have to make them give a shit, and that is marketing's job. And so if you're not thinking about the value or the purpose or the challenges that your audience have when you're making any content, but in particular video stuff, because it can come across as a little bit narcissistic, especially that thought leadership stuff, that, you know, you do have to draw it back to that. So, I mean, it's hard because, you know, especially if it is a directive from upon high that the CEO wants to stick himself in front of a camera and talk about how amazing your company is for 10 minutes. You know, we still have a duty of care, I guess, if you want to call it that, as marketers, to sort of rein that in and try and like take it back to that, you know, well, okay, if you're going to talk for 10 minutes, what are you going to talk about that's going to drive value for anyone watching the video?
Yeah, I think people have made that mistake of bundling in some of the people you mentioned, Ruta, Grant Cardone, and to a lesser extent, because he's less of a snake oil salesman, Gary Vee, or even people like Stephen Bartlett, who've built up they've got these huge kind of business personal brands, and they produce a lot of video content and they get huge amounts of engagement on those things, and a lot of the time the stuff that they're putting out there is just regurgitated kind of drivel. People see that kind of stuff and think, oh, you know, these kind of business leaders are getting a huge amount of engagement, and, you know, if they release a product or a book or something like that, it's flying off the shelves because of that. So we can kind of just get our founder to be like that. He's quite charismatic. But the mistake that they make is obviously that the brand's already been kind of built, and they're already quite successful people, or they've got exposure beyond LinkedIn and and things like that. So it's a completely different game, whereas nobody really wants to hear. I don't want to hear anybody's kind of life journey anyway, even Bartlett's or Gary Vee's or any of these people. But I even less want to hear about, you know, somebody who's just founded a company. They might have it might be a great product, and they might have a great culture and all those kind of things. But I just don't think anybody really cares enough. I don't think it's going to drive anything other than, you know, maybe if you're looking if you try to raise at the time, that kind of stuff might be a bit more relevant, because you know, the founder obviously is important when you're doing those kind of funding rounds, but I'm not sure that it's necessary for us to be watching those things on LinkedIn. And then, you know, you see the opposite end of it, which is really terrible stuff where there's even less planning gone in than let's stick the founder and get him to talk about his or her kind of life journey. It's just, you know, talk about your day, a really boring day, you know, that kind of stuff. It seems just like a complete waste of time.
I think it's okay to do that. All I'm gonna say is I think it's okay to do that stuff if you're okay to do a bit of a DIY job on it, right? Because if your founder, you know, has a bit of a profile and you want to use that, you know, if that is something that is, you know, one of the tools in your marketing toolbox to use your founders network to help propel some stuff, I think some of that's fine, but I guess that's where I would say I'd draw the line between where you spend your money and your time and effort and resource and where you don't. I wouldn't spend any money, time or resource on that, but I'd let it happen if it's at all useful. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't be bringing in professionals to do that sort of thing. I'd be saying to the founder, I'm going to interview you over Zoom and I'm going to like spend 20 minutes editing it, and then that's what we're going to, and then we'll put bits and pieces on social or whatever it is we want to do with it, as long as there is a purpose to it. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't put any resource behind it. What do you think? Am I completely wrong, guys, or?
No, I think you're right, and I think the difference is, for me, well, purpose is a key word there. Like, what is the purpose of this? If your founder's got genuine kind of insight about the industry that they're kind of disrupting, for instance, if it's a SaaS company, get them on camera talking about those challenges and kind of how they came across the challenges and all those kind of things. I think that's only going to do you good, because it kind of does lead back to the product and things like that. I think it's the flip side of that, where it's just a bit narcissistic, kind of just talking about themselves, or kind of, you know, logging their days, like a bit like a vlog kind of diary thing. I think those things, when you get to a certain size, some people probably do have an interest in what those people kind of, how they take the coffee in the morning and what the kind of general day to day looks like. But I think it's a really high barrier that to kind of insert yourself into. So yeah, no, I think you're right. It's not completely without merit, but I think you've just got to choose the stories that you try to tell, and, you know, what you're trying to get out the back end of it.
You're not making videos for your audience necessarily, because especially if we're talking about LinkedIn, you know, people are there with certain job titles for a certain reason. We're not there like the way we consume YouTube or TikTok, where we just want to see what people get up to and how they make their coffee. You know, if that's what you're into, I guess if you're on LinkedIn, that's not what you're there for. So the expectation is also weird and doesn't necessarily align if that's what you're doing. But if you want to do that kind of stuff, there's other platforms and you can build audiences there. If you're like, you know, if you want to be the influencer guy, that's completely fine, and it'll probably help your business in the long term. But also, it's, you know, it's going to be a grind to get to that first 1,000. I'll tell you that much.
We know. We're trying.
We know. Yeah. Agreed. One of the other, I guess, things we talk about a lot is, in terms of general content, but also this goes for video, is having a video and creating video is amazing, but I think a lot of people kind of stop thinking about it there, and how do they promo it? How do they, you know, cut it up and use it in different ways? And all of those things isn't really factored in. What's your take on that? Is that something that you kind of think about as an agency and encounter, or not so much?
Yeah, I mean, we see it, and you see it really. So the promo thing and what you're actually going to do with the video is a great one, because you see a real difference in, if we work with a small, like, service-based business that they've got a really boring or complicated product or something like that, or they've got a process that they use really boring, so we're going to produce some video content to it, kind of overview what that looks like, why it's a good thing. That's great. If they just stick that on the About Us page of their website and then kind of forget about it, it's not a complete waste of money, but, you know, it's not doing a huge amount. So one of the things that we try and talk to clients about is getting the most kind of value out of, if you're spending a few £1,000s on some video content, like, you should be able to use it in as many different locations as possible. You know, can this be used as part of cold kind of outreach? Can we take little clips and GIFs and stuff like that? People like clicking on moving images in emails, so what bits can we take out of that to drive people to it? Can it be cut down for social? Can you use part of it as a paid ad? You know, if we really kind of get it down to a 10-15 kind of second version, those kind of things. You know, where is it going to sit in that kind of funnel? Most of those real small businesses probably haven't thought that far ahead, so getting them into that kind of thinking mode of this isn't just a one and done, stick it on your website and forget about it because it's just going to generate you hundreds of leads every day. It doesn't really work like that, you know. Although you'd be surprised how many people. Yeah, exactly. You'd be surprised how many people pitch it like that, though. Especially, you know, explainer videos become. I don't really like the term explainer video. I have to use it a lot because it's become kind of a product that people sell. But you will see people kind of, you know, this will 10x your leads and do this kind of stuff like that. It's probably not gonna. It's not a silver bullet. There are no silver bullets, which I'm sure you two can attest to. But yeah, so that's one of the things is where can it be used across that funnel? How many times can we use it? How can we repurpose it as much as anything? You know, all those assets. If you're creating like a 90-second, 2-minute video, you're creating quite a lot of assets. So where can those assets then be used across other things? You know, if you're putting a pitch deck together, there's a nice little tie-in to be able to take some of those assets across there. So that's really the best idea and the best way to get the most value out of when you're producing content. And again, if you're shooting content, if you're paying for a crew to come out or something like that, a day's worth of shooting, you should be able to get 6 months worth of content out of that easily, really. Just short clips, sound bites, little bits for social, little bits that you can kind of scatter all over your website and your landing pages that just kind of tie everything in together. And I think that's the real shame when people spend that kind of money without some proper direction, either internally or from an outside agency, is they've paid thousands of pounds to send a film crew out to shoot some kind of talking head footage, and they just get a single video back. There you go. There's your kind of corporate kind of yawn fest for the year. And then, you know, all that does really is then put people off. You know, they don't get anything out of it really, other than the kind of, oh, that's Dave from accounting talking. That's nice. Nice to see Dave on the video. There's kind of that feel-good kind of thing that people get when they get content produced.
Yeah.
But if ultimately it doesn't really drive anything, and you're not measuring anything that it was, you know, that you're trying to drive, then it's probably going to put you off spending that money. You know, I'm sure people in SEO have the same feeling about people kind of like winging it with SEO or kind of doing it for 2 months and not seeing any results, stuff like that. It kind of, you know, puts them off spending any more money in that kind of way. So yeah, those are a couple of things I think that people should be doing. But a lot of that comes down to the planning. If you don't go into these things with a proper plan, like what are the desired outcomes for this? How are we going to measure the success of this video kind of campaign? Where's it going to go? Who are we trying to reach with it? What are our kind of desired outcomes? If you start with that, then it puts you in a bit of a better position to kind of build the content based on that and keep referring back to it. Is this serving the purpose of what this video kind of content is for? It puts you in a much better place to go, right, now we know what we're doing with it, we can produce it, where are we going to distribute it, how are we going to distribute it, and how we're going to keep distributing it beyond, I don't know, like I said, putting it in the email. Yeah, putting it in the email newsletter, we've produced a video, please like it.
It goes back to your point as well, Ruta, which is around the channels, right? And then therefore that should dictate the purpose of your video. Because I sort of think, you know, if you're putting stuff on YouTube versus putting something on your website, there's a different purpose, and you are going to want to tackle that type of video content differently. And I don't think that I have very rarely seen that factored into any kind of video briefing. And I guess that's also part of it, right, Chris, is the briefing, the upfront process. Before we started this podcast, when we were chatting, I shared a story about my friend who's an actor who does a lot of this stuff. So he does a lot of voiceover stuff for like corporates, and he will literally have to do like self-takes in the middle of the night on like a Friday night because some bloody marketer hasn't got their act together. And he's like, we need an actor to do a voiceover on Monday. Find us someone. So Chris, like, what's your experience with that briefing process? Like, are there people who nail it, or is it always a bit of a hodgepodge?
So, two camps for the briefing. So we have some briefing docs that we prefer people to fill those out. You know, they're kind of reverse engineered for what we'd like to get out of it. If you only give us this, we should be able to kind of come up with a concept and a script and stuff like that. But quite often, that's later on in the kind of with clients. You know, we're moving ahead with something, so we can kind of dictate this is the information that we need, and we can dig into what the purpose of the video and stuff like that. The worst ones are getting a brief that they've put together that they may be pitching out to 2 or 3 agencies and looking for kind of feedback and quotes and stuff like that. And you get 2 versions. One, the world's most vague brief. You know, almost impossible to kind of quote for it because it just doesn't really tell you anything about what they're actually looking to do. It's just kind of, you know, and those tend to be the people who've been told we need to do a video. Maybe it's come from upstairs or something like that, or you know, somebody else they know has done a video. And so they tend to be the super brief, super vague. We'd like an explainer video by next week.
So by next week is never an acceptable deadline for anything.
No.
Don't do that.
No content will be good if you give a week's notice, will it? No content. Just never.
Especially from an external agency that have zero context on you right now and need to get a resource in and book their voiceovers and, like, you know, all of those things, like, absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah. You'd be amazed how often it happens.
Hopefully it'll happen one less time because of this podcast.
Well, hopefully, yeah. I mean, the trouble is, the deadline thing can be a killer, really, especially because, again, it comes down to the planning, but a lot of the times this is kind of, we've got a show coming up, or the website's relaunching and we've decided one of the things we wanted to do was put some video content on there. Great. I think that's a great use for it. When's the website launching? 2 weeks' time. Right, okay. If any agencies is telling you that they can get it ready for that, I would avoid, unless they're a massive agency, they've got huge amounts of resources, they can kind of jump on some, and they just happen to be really quiet for the next 2 weeks, which seems quite unlikely. But yeah, so you get either super vague brief, no real information about. There's usually some information about what the product is, what the company is, or something like that. But there's usually very little information about what the purpose of the video is and what people are trying to kind of get out of it. You know, they try to book more, get more demos booked, or something like. Even as something kind of as vague as that is useful. At least we know a bit of a purpose. Well, the flip side of it is you get a brief that's probably a bit over the top in terms of detail. That's, you know, we've had a few that have been 4 pages of kind of briefing for what has eventually been a 60-second kind of product video or something like that. So I'd say that's briefing overkill in my view, because, you know, it probably doesn't need to be that in depth, and you can't really account for that much information when you're talking about a single piece of video content, which you get that. So one of the things that I like is when companies have said, "Oh, we've written the script ourselves for a video. We'd like to quote for a video. We've seen you, etc., etc. We've written the script." I'll usually check at that point, if it's me who's dealing with them, is it set in stone, this script? This is before I've read it. Is it set in stone, or are you looking for some support with this kind of script writing? It's set in stone. The CEO signed it off. He's happy with it. That usually a little alarm bell goes off in my head. The CEO's happy with it. Okay, I'm not sure why he was seeing it, to be honest. I'll get the script through for a 60-second kind of product video or something like that. And this has genuinely happened in the last 12 months a couple of times. The script has been 800 words long for a 60-second video. So our measuring that we usually do to kind of guesstimate how long a video is going to do is a simple word count, because usually if there's a voiceover, it's pretty accurate. So 130 words is 60 seconds read out by a voiceover artist. So, I mean, I don't expect people to know that, but you must have read the script out loud at 800 words and realised that it's not possible to read it in 60 seconds. As you turned on to page 2, yeah, as you turned on to page 2 of the script, you must have thought, I mean, this is a bit lengthy, guys. Can we?
I don't think even Busta Rhymes could do that justice.
Exactly. Not
I was
even.
gonna say, it's like you're not recording Ulysses. You know, come on, man. Like, no one cares.
It's all right if you need to get the info in, that's fine. But you know, like, be realistic. It's not going to be 60 seconds.
But then, Ruta, you and I would say, if someone handed you, Chris, an 800-page script, right, we'd be like, right, well, you're going to do 60 seconds of that as your video, and then you're going to have some other content that supports. You're not just going to do a video, because otherwise, literally, no one is going to watch an 8-minute video of your CEO talking. And if they do, it's probably, like we've joked before, it's probably like their wife. Yeah. Like, yeah, well done, honey.
If that. I don't think my wife watched an 8-minute video of me talking about anything.
We'll personally send her this podcast episode once it's out.
She will not listen.
What if we say we talked about her? Maybe we'll then pique her interest.
And also, it's like, we'll be like, it's halfway through, so you're going to have to listen, otherwise you won't be able to find, you know, you'll need to be able to find it.
Now that we've spoken about how things don't go really well, how about we turn this around? How are some of the ways that marketers can support their videographers and support their animators in making sure that you guys do the best job you can and that we get the best stuff that we can for our given budgets and resources and all of those good things?
So I think for us, when we've had kind of partnerships that have gone particularly well, collaboration is always the best way to approach these projects. You know, an agency should know how to produce kind of video content and how to produce it well, how to kind of structure it and all that kind of stuff. They know the technical side of it, but they're never really going to understand a company's brand and product and all that kind of stuff. So that's where the two lots of information need to meet, really. Planning is just the most important thing, though. Going into it with a clear plan, and usually from a client perspective, it's better when they come with a clear plan already, so that you can kind of approach that brief with, we understand what you're trying to get out of this, and here's how we're going to kind of get you there. That's not always the case, but having a definite plan up front about what you're looking to get out of the video, just not from an output point of view in terms of like, oh, we want this series of videos or we're going to do it, but like we've spoke about, what are the kind of marketing, how are we going to measure the success of these videos? You know, what are we looking for in terms of views or kind of an increase in demo bookings or whatever that kind of metric is that we're going to judge this campaign by. Having those up front just makes it a lot easier for an agency to kind of map out what those videos might look like, because you've always got that as a kind of a starting point, and you're all on the same page in terms you can always go back to that and go, is it serving that purpose? Is it actually going to do that? No, just get rid of that bit then. You know, we don't need to talk about that because it's not relevant for what the purposes are. So I think, yeah, definitely being kind of collaborative, one, really clear planning and from the outset. And I think just being open from both sides in terms of like things being a bit fluid during that process. It's great to have a good plan and know where you're trying to get to, but sometimes you unlock things as you kind of building videos and stuff like that. So it's always good for a client to be kind of open to kind of suggestion and stuff like that. And likewise for the agency to be open to criticism sometimes if they've maybe not hit the nail on the head. It doesn't happen every single time, regardless of how good a brief is. No creative agency is going to get everything right the first time. And how they deal with that is, you know, having been on both sides of the fence, how an agency deals with that kind of feedback usually is a good indicator of what that relationship's going to look like for the next couple of years. Because generally speaking, creatives don't like criticism on their work. And I can understand that. Yeah.
I think I like the point you make there about collaboration and being a little fluid, because I think the other big thing for me is essentially having a little bit of trust in each other. So, if you've done your research and you've picked a video or animation agency to partner with, they've probably done a bunch of these and they probably know roughly what works for their clients. So don't be so rigid in thinking that you know all the best answers, because you probably don't. It's impossible. You're just one person. So, take their side on as well. Of course, it all depends on the quality of the agency you get, or the animator or videographer you get. But just that kind of open trust in each other, that you're both trying to get the best outcome, because essentially if the agency completely flops and does a shit video that is not good for you, you're not going to work with them again. So, they're probably trying really hard to retain you as a customer. So kind of that flexibility, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and that, you know what, that's a sticking point more often than it should be, really, with certainly with clients. I think that you can, as an agency, we can only push so hard for our opinion on something. Even if it's a line in a script that we think it's not necessary, it's not serving any purpose, we can just kill that. Sometimes we end up including stuff that we don't agree with, but a client's insisting on, no, the CEO wants that kind of line in there because he thinks it's important. Okay, we don't, but we'll put it in there because we've asked 3 times for it to be removed, and you keep adding it back in. And I think, that collaboration thing, and once you get a certain, that trust builds up over time, though, I think, doesn't it? When you're working with outside agencies in any kind of walk of life, I think that once you've established that relationship, it's a lot easier to do those collaborative projects where you can kind of be a bit more blunt and go, it's not going to work, what we're trying to do here. You need to scrap the brief, start again, or this whole section of the video isn't going to work, and here's why. It's difficult to do that sometimes, I think, early on in a client relationship, and early on if you're just starting out as a creative, if you're a freelancer or something like that, having those conversations is, I can attest to, it's hard having those conversations when you're just starting out to try and be, in your head you're thinking, well, I know I'm right because this is what I do for a living, but are they going to walk away from the project if I kind of come back? So I think learning how to have those conversations is really, really important as well.
I think as marketers as well, we should be doing this with all of our agencies, right? Is that, we're in partnership with an agency. We shouldn't be at odds with an agency. The reason we need you is because you have a specialist set of skills that we do not have, because not all marketers can do everything, believe it or not.
Believe it or not, we're not animators.
We have to accept that. And I think the other thing is, and Chris, again, it goes back to some of your earlier points as well, around we need to make sure we have a plan. We also ourselves need to learn to push back internally when we are asked to do stuff that has no purpose. So when we are asked by a CEO or someone senior, to do something like some of the videos we've been taking the mick out of, we have to learn ourselves to manage those internal conversations, so that then we don't end up spending $2,000 on video, and then everyone goes, "What was the ROI of that video?" We're like, "Well, absolutely nothing, because it was pointless." So that's on us. We have to learn to do that. It's not easy, but we do. There are ways to do it.
No. Yeah, I think it must be hard having those conversations, like with anything. If you're relatively new into a company as a marketer, having those kind of conversations where something's come from above that you don't agree with. I mean, I'm sure it happens to kind of most people's walk of life, but I feel like with marketers, it's the budget that's getting spent at the end of the day, and you're essentially going to be judged to a large degree on how that budget was spent and what the return on the investment was for that. So if you're kind of being pushed to produce something that you think, I don't think this is a good idea, that ultimately you're going to get you're accountable for that spend. Yeah. That can't be easy. 6 months into a role somewhere. And I've seen it a little bit last. I've been doing this for a while, and you can spot the differences sometimes. Sometimes you get a marketer it seems extremely confident in their abilities and stuff like that, and they're 3 months into a role pushing for stuff that they're just they've not that they've not got approval, but they've not had to get buy-in from above because they've just pushed it through. And then sometimes you do see the flip side of that, where maybe it's somebody's first more senior role, and they're kind of
not sure
being asked to do things that, you know, I don't think this is a good idea, but I'm not quite sure how to push back on it. So we're just going to do it, and then I'll try and figure it out later. So
yeah, if you're in that space, I think there's definitely a couple of things me and Emma can advise you on what to do. So one is delay. If you can delay the spend, do that, because that's probably going to be your best bet. Or two, if you can't delay the spend, make sure you meticulously track the spend and then the effects of the spend. So then if it comes around again, you can be like, oh no, this did not work at all the last time. I'm not comfortable spending money on this, and have the data to back that up. Because it's a really crappy place to be, because you know, oftentimes you're the budget holder, but like people are spending your budget as if it's their bank account, which is bizarre anyway.
I agree. Yeah, Rita, I agree. Obviously, I agree with everything you say, and I think again, it goes back to that. Like, if
you
someone
don't have
does
to.
ask you to do something, no. Well, I always do, because I'm like, we're basically like, I was going to say we're like two same brain
human
cells of the same brain, but whatever. That's like putting us down. We're
I
really
like
clever.
that. Only one brain cell each.
One between the two of us. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I the only thing I would add is, you know, obviously we talked about this in the planning, and like make sure there are some metrics that you're going to like track up front. And I think if you are really worried about saying to somebody, I don't think there's any point in doing this, and you're like, I can't bring myself to say that, you can say, right, these are the traditional metrics we would measure for this type of content, and this is the kind of performance I would hope to see from it. And then you may be met with a, I didn't realise, or I don't think we need to do that, because, you know, you might get some of that as well. But you can say, but we're still going to track it, and we're going to see how it goes, like Ruta said. So you can always throw those kind of phrases out and say, this is the sort of stuff in marketing we're bothered about, and this is what we track, and we will see what happens. So just to elaborate further on your point, basically, Ruta. But yeah, that's the way to do it. So thanks to the original Chris Walker for joining us, and we will be back very soon with more content.